Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wonderland Sessions. This is session number 11, which means I am now officially on to 1, 2, 3 hands, which is really exciting. So welcome. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you join. And I took a little bit of a break from Wonderland Sessions because I was out of town. I was in Australia. I was in New Zealand. I was traveling. I was speaking. Was essentially living my best life, and so we took a little break from Wonderland Sessions, but now we are back and I have new things to tell you, new things to talk about, and I'm really excited to dive into this. So what I said on my Instagram the other day was that this week's session was all about sensuality, sexuality, being in your body, and what that means, and how that relates to creating the life that we want. How does that work? How do those things tie together? How do we get traction in that area and use it to impact the rest of what we do? Because the truth is that a lot of us live in our heads, especially those of us who are really into the self-development world, self-improvement. We're very cerebral. We like tactics, we like steps, we like a process. We like to be told, do this, then do that, then do this, and you'll get this result, right? We all love those promises. However, it doesn't always work like that. And when we're constantly in our heads, we're constantly processing, we're constantly trying to think our way through problems and figure them out, we're also cutting ourselves off from the information that we have within our bodies. And so it's really an interesting dichotomy, and it's an interesting dance where we need to learn to be able to pay attention to what's going on with us internally and not just what's going on with us mentally. And that can be a difficult shift to make, and it's something I've been really practicing over the last year or so, and it's been challenging and rewarding and mind-blowing, and it's also opened me up to a whole lot of things that I didn't even really know I could experience or feel or discover. And so that's been really rewarding, and I want to tell you what I've learned about that so that if you feel like you're in a similar space, maybe where you are very cerebral, you're not necessarily in your body, some things that I've learned that you can try, that you can test, and that we can just rock out. So there's a lot to say about this, And I think one of the most important things, or just something that I see a lot, and I spoke about this when I was in Brisbane a couple of weeks ago at the Soulpreneurs Conference. I spoke about how I feel that a lot of women in the spirituality space, in the New Age space, are very cut off from their bodies. They maybe are doing a lot of yoga and a lot of meditation and drinking a lot of green juice and doing a lot of gut cleanses and quitting sugar and doing things that are good for their bodies, but they're not connected to their bodies. They're not listening to their bodies. And a lot of people within this space really seem very disconnected from their sexuality and their sensuality. And when this happens, we're cutting ourselves off from a really major piece of what gives us our own personal power and what can inspire us and what we can use as a kind of fuel in our lives. And so I think personally that it's important that we are able to integrate that and that we're able to start practicing these things and start practicing being in our bodies and seeing what that feels like and seeing what that does in our lives, how that changes things, how that impacts the rest of our lives, because none of these things exist in a vacuum. They affect everything else that we do. And so I think it's really interesting, even just from a point of curiosity, to see what happens when we plug ourselves into our bodies and we then see what happens. So one of the reasons why this is important is not just because it feels good, but it's because it makes you a much better manifester when you can feel things in your body. When you're really in your body, you can create the things that you want much faster because the knowing that you have is coming from somewhere deeper than just your mind. It's coming from your full body. It's like a full body experience. And that changes everything. So a lot of us are kind of in this space where we think about, what do I want? And we sit there, and it's very cerebral, right? We sit there with a pen and a paper and we think like, well, I think I want this, and how would I achieve that? And what would the steps be? And how do I get there? And let me write down all the points, and let me do a list of pros and cons, and let me do a mind map and all of these things. And that can be useful to a point, absolutely, definitely. However, our bodies also have information for us, and if we're stuck up here processing all of these things all the time, we are cutting ourselves off from that source of information. So when we allow ourselves to feel things, when we allow ourselves to tap into our intuition, and our intuition is not up here, our intuition is down here. When we tap into this, it's a much deeper source of knowing. It's a much more stable place. It gives us a lot more of a sense of security than we get when we're simply thinking about things. Because the truth is that the human mind is very tricky, and we can rationalize pretty much anything. That is what the human mind is made to do. That's what it specializes in. We can justify anything. We can come up with reasons for anything. But we can't fake how we feel. How we feel is everything. So if you do find that when you're thinking about what you want, it's a little bit confusing and maybe you're not totally sure and you can kind of go this way and you can also go that way, I want you to start paying attention to what it feels like. And this is even hard for me to talk about because this is very unusual for me. This is not the realm that I usually operate in. I like to be logical and process driven. I like to write things down and really make sense of them and have a good argument for why this, why that, blah, blah, blah. But when I take the time to really think, or not even think, but when I take the time to really feel how I feel about something, it gives me a totally different sense of information. It gives me a different perspective on what's really going on. So when you are doing this, when you're plugged into your intuition, and when you are using your body as more than just a vehicle to carry your mind around, which is kind of how I thought of my body for a really long time. It was just a vehicle for my mind. It was just how my mind moved from place to place. When I started thinking about my body differently and started to feel things throughout my entire body rather than just thinking about them and processing them, it sped up my manifestation powers like a trillion-fold. And it's really an important thing that we are just plugged into our bodies. So when we talk about the idea of feeling good in terms of like Abraham-Hicks feeling good being the priority, how it's always like your first goal, how feeling good in your body and feeling good in your mind then spills over into everything else in your life and makes everything else in your life feel good. One of the ways that we talk about doing that is by breaking up momentum, where if you start to think about something that doesn't feel good or dwell on something that doesn't feel good, we want to break that momentum as soon as we can. So as soon as you notice that you're going into a problem spiral or a fear spiral, we take a break and we disrupt it as soon as we can. And some people will say that you can like think your way out of it, and yes, that is possible. But I believe that the like secret sauce on this is that you have to use your body to get yourself out of that place. You have to break the momentum by physically using your body to do something else. So meditation counts. Meditation is a full body practice, but so is writing, going for a walk, exercising, playing with your dog, singing, dancing, having an orgasm, having a nap, laughing, climbing a tree, vacuuming, doing the dishes, whatever. All of those things are a physical practice that will help you break that momentum, where if you're not feeling good, it'll help you get into a much better feeling place. And it'll break that cycle of thinking about these things that upset us, these things that perplex us, these things that worry us. And I've said this a million times, but I'm going to say it again. When we are in the state of worrying about a problem is never the time when we're able to solve that problem. Never works, because we're in the same mind state. We need to break that up. We need to go to a different place in our mind with our bodies and have a break from the problem Einstein used to take a break from his problems when he was working stuff out on a chalkboard, and he would go and play the violin for an hour. And that was his way of stepping away from the problem, giving himself some mental space and clarity so he could then come back to it with fresh eyes. And I love this example. I've used it before, but it's so potent because it really shows that even if you have a brilliant mind, you can't think your way through these problems when you're stuck in them. You need to be elsewhere. You need to do something else, break it up, and change the momentum of what's going on as soon as possible. So, the other thing is when we talk about Abraham-Hicks concepts and we talk about the importance of feeling good is not just something that happens in your mind, even though we think it is and we think that it starts there. But actually, feeling good is a full body process again, which is also why when we talk about having a sacred morning practice or, doing whatever it takes in the morning to get us into that good place, a lot of those things are physical. A lot of those things are meditation, working out, dancing, taking your dog for a walk, speaking a gratitude list aloud, right? So feeling good is not just in your mind, it's also in your body. And something that really, really struck me when I was listening to Abraham-Hicks months ago was she said that alignment, which is that sense of feeling good, alignment is when we feel good, we're plugged into our source, we're getting the information that we need from ourselves, so we're not seeking it in other people, we're not looking to other people for validation or for love. We are like a fully renewable resource and we're feeding ourselves, we're our own power source. When we're in that place, that is called alignment, right? But sensuality is also alignment. So if you go into a sensual sexual encounter and you're not already feeling plugged into yourself, then you're not going to have anything to give. You're not going to be connected to yourself, which means you can't connect to anybody else. And that was a really big light bulb moment for me and has been really, really helpful to think that we need to just take a moment to reconnect with ourselves before we enter into any of those kinds of situations or experiences. Because otherwise we're thinking about problems, we're not in our body, we're just in our head. Maybe you're thinking about the workday or you're worried about something. You're not in a place of feeling good about yourself. And so any then sensual expression or sexual expression is going to be stunted, it's going to be cut off, it's going to be small, and it's not going to be coming from a place of personal power and true expression and true joy, which is what the goals are when you're trying to express yourself in that way. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. And so just that idea that sensuality is alignment. I wrote that down on a piece of paper because I was like, that's a good one. So I think that's a really good thing to think about. So the other thing that, another reason why, being embodied and being in your body is important is because when we have turned this part of ourselves off, when we're not connected to our desires, we're not connected to our sexuality, we really cut off our connection with our own power source, and so everything else in our life suffers. So obviously our relationships suffer, but so does our creativity and our health and our general sense of enjoyment. And when you're not having a great time with your own body and you're not feeling connected to your own body, which doesn't necessarily mean having a lot of sex. It could mean just that you're like not working out, or you're eating poorly, or you're just not looking after your body. Like, you're in pain and you're not going to get a massage, or you're not looking after your body in the way that it needs it. You're not drinking enough water, whatever it is. When we're not connected to our bodies, everything else suffers, and our creativity massively suffers. We really need to look after our bodies in order to be expressing and creating at the highest level. And that's a really important part of the process that I think a lot of people forget or avoid, or, have writer's block and just sit there staring at their screen. But if you got up and you jumped on a mini trampoline, or you did some hula hooping in your living room or something like that, then you would have a completely different experience and you would break up that cycle. So using your body to break that momentum when you're not feeling good or you're not feeling creative is really, really important. So we need to really start to learn to practice being in our bodies. And one exercise that I heard of recently, which I thought was really interesting, was to close your eyes and visualize every single part of your body, starting at the very tip of your toes, and visualize or imagine what would be the best feeling sensation on that part of your body, and then allow yourself to feel it kind of in your mind. Like imagine yourself feeling that and then move on to the next part. So like the first spot would be like your toe. The next spot might be like the bottom of your foot or the top of your foot. And then you would move to your ankle. And you'd move up slowly and incrementally. And the idea is to just have an awareness of your body, like remind yourself that it's there and remind yourself that it's capable of feeling lots of pleasure. And that every piece of your body experiences pleasure differently, has different desires and different needs. So what feels good on your toe might not feel so good on your knee. You might want something totally different on your knee. Maybe on your knee you just want to rub your fingers over it, but on your toe you want to like rub it with a tassel-y thing. Who knows, right? It's up to you. But the idea is to have these practices where we just put ourselves into our bodies intentionally, and it becomes, a part of our life and a part of our daily practice. It becomes something that we just do habitually, and we practice putting ourselves in our bodies. So another thing that I wanted to just add to that, that I thought was really interesting, I was listening to some Abraham-Hicks this morning, in fact, and she was talking about deciding to feel good anyway, or just the question of like, can you feel good anyway? And I love this. This applies to everything. This is, your work, your creativity, your relationships, your money situation, your home, absolutely everything that is coming up in your life. Like, we're very rarely going to be in a situation where everything is going perfectly. Everything is wonderful. Everything is exactly as we would have mapped it out if we could, right? These things seldom happen because we're always in a process of experiencing contrast and then realizing like that's not what I want and I want this, and we're always moving closer towards the things that we want, and we're filtering and we're thinking about it, right? So we're very rarely going to be in a situation where everything is perfect and everything is exactly how we want it, and people are responding to us in the exact ways that we would like them to, etc., etc. But the question is, can you feel good anyway? And I want you to start bringing this into your life and into your daily practice as just a question that you ask yourself. Can I feel good anyway? Because that's really what this is about. So having a morning practice isn't about waking up and being like, everything's perfect, therefore I feel amazing. It's not. Having a morning practice is about waking up, seeing what is good for what it is, visualizing what we do want, and putting our attention on the things that make us feel good, and then choosing to feel good anyway, even if your partner is annoying you, or you're uncertain about your employment situation, or you don't have as much money in the bank as perhaps you would like to. It's asking yourself, can I feel good anyway? And that's really the practice. And that's just about disciplining your mind and choosing to put yourself in a place where you feel good, even when, in an ideal scenario, maybe things would be different. Maybe it wouldn't be quite like this. But the thing is that if we're in these situations that don't always ring every single bell that we have, and we choose to suffer because suffering is optional, then we are going to be suffering all the time. We really are. And so we have the choice to feel good anyway. So there are a few ways that we can do this. One of them is that we choose to squash those feelings where we don't feel good. So I was watching an interview that Tony and Sage Robbins did the other day, and Tony Robbins was talking about this idea that suffering is optional, and that if you have a feeling that doesn't feel good, where you're afraid or you're stressed or you're scared or overwhelmed or whatever's going on, that you make the decision that you don't stay there for any longer than 90 seconds. And the way that you do that, of course, is by choosing to focus on something else, by expressing gratitude, by breaking the momentum, by using your body. And Sage was talking about how it's not that she doesn't ever feel afraid. It's not that she doesn't ever feel scared or worried, because of course she does. But what she does in that moment is she realizes that she's doing it. She takes a moment to process what's really going on, and she lets it go. And it can actually be as simple as that. We can have worries that follow us around our entire lives, or we can choose to notice them and simply let them go in the moment. And when I was in Australia, I was talking about this a lot, where people were saying, you know, how do I change? How do I do something different? And it's literally about making the choice to let it go whenever it comes up. That's it. I know that sounds really simplistic, but that's the truth. We really just have to be like, you know what? I'm letting it go. And then you think about something else. And if it comes up again, you think about something else. And that's a really important process, a really important practice. And I hope that that is helpful for you, because the more that I remind myself that that's an option, the more capable I feel, the more I realize that I don't have to live in the fear space. I can acknowledge that it's there, of course, because you have to acknowledge that it's there. You can't deny it away. But you can acknowledge that it's there and then be like, you know what? I don't want to stay here. This doesn't feel good. I have made a decision that feeling good is my priority and that suffering is fucking optional, and I don't want to do that. And so I'm going to let this go, and I'm going to think about something else. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do 10 jumping jacks, and I'm going to change how I feel. I'm going to break it up using my body. Yes. So this was perhaps a shorter Wonderland session, but I hope this was useful. Sometimes I think the shorter the sessions, the better, because I can give you a few important points that you can then hopefully take with you and use and bring into your real life. As always, if you have questions about anything, please hit me in my DMs and I'll either reply to you there or I will bring it up in a future Wonderland session. And also, if you have, suggestions for things you'd like me to cover in these sessions, please let me know. I am always open to your suggestions and I love them, and it helps me tailor this so that it's really useful for you. So that is Wonderland session number 11. I hope that you enjoyed it. I love you all very, very much. Send me your questions and I will see you this time next week. Yay!